Hello everyone and welcome to today's lesson. The chords of the day today are 1/6 and 5/6. Let's go ahead and get started with 1/6. 1/6 is the tonic in the first inversion. We label it with the Roman numeral 1. And next to that Roman numeral 1, we are putting a small 6 in order to indicate that this chord is in the first inversion. The degrees of the scale that this chord consists of are, starting with the lowest note, 3, 5, and 1. Let's move on to chord 5/6. 5/6 is the dominant in the first inversion. We label it with the Roman numeral 5. And next to that Roman numeral 5, we are putting a small 6 in order to indicate that this 5 chord is in the first inversion. The degrees of the scale that this chord consists of are, starting with the lowest note, 7, 2, and 5. So what do these two chords do? What is their function? How do they differ from a root position tonic and a root position dominant? There are two functions that 1/6 and 5/6 can fulfill. So the first function is that the first inversion tonic and the first inversion dominant soften the harmonies of the tonic and the dominant. So you can use these first inversions to, for example, in the middle of your piece. They are not as final sounding as chord 1 in the root position or chord 5 in the root position. But for the very beginning and the very end of your piece, it is much better to use root position tonic and a root position dominant. And the second function of 1/6 and 5/6 is to expand the harmony of 1 and of 5. So if you have chord 1 and you want to expand it, you want to prolong it over time, you want that chord 1 to last a little longer, you can first write chord 1 in the root position, and then you can repeat chord 1, but in its first inversion. And in this way, you are expanding the same harmony of chord 1, but you are giving it a slightly different color through inverting the chord. And the same thing you can do with the dominant. So if you want to expand the harmony of the dominant, you first write your dominant in the root position, and after that, in the next chord, you write the dominant in the first inversion. And in this way, you are prolonging the dominant harmony. It's still the same notes, but their order differs. And because of that inversion, you are going to get a slightly different color while still staying in the same harmony. Now, for doubling, there is a rule for doubling. In 1/6 and 5/6, you can double whatever you want, but remember to never ever double the leading tone. And the leading tone, which is the 7th degree of the scale, is the bass note in 5/6. So when you're in 5/6, it is important to not double the note that you have in the bass. And in terms of voice leading, it is important that when you have that leading note in the bass in 5/6, it always has to resolve going up a half step to the root of the tonic that follows after 5/6. Let's take a look at the following examples of chord progressions. So previously, we saw the following chord progression: 1, 5, and 1. And now let's see how a first inversion tonic can soften such a chord progression. Instead of 1, 5, and 1, we can have 1, 5, and 1, 6. and take a look at the bass line. So the bass in the first example leaped up a fifth and then leaped down a fifth. And it sounds very definitive and as if it is the very end of the piece of music. But in the second example, when we finish on 1/6, the bass first leaps up a fifth and then it just skips one note and goes down to E. So it just leaps down a third. And it is much less final sounding and much softer. Now let's take a look at an example with the dominant. So previously we have seen the following chord progression: 1, 5, and 1. And now let's take a look at this chord progression: 1, 5, 6, and 1. And take a look once again at the bass line. Now the bass line moves in steps from C down to B and from B up to C. So thanks to the fact that we have 5, 6, the bass no longer has to leap. The bass can now have a very smooth melodic line. If we were not able to invert chords, our bass lines would be very leapy. The bass would leap all the time, and it would be quite a difficult bass line to sing. But thanks to the fact that we can invert chords, our bass lines can become more melodic, can become smoother and softer. And now let's move on to see how a 1/6 chord and a 5/6 chord can expand the harmonies. When we prolong the tonic, we make it sound longer, but we change its color through inverting the tonic. So take a look at this example. We have 3 chords, 1, 5, and 1. And let's say that we want that first tonic to last longer. Well, with 1/6, we can make that happen. We can turn that example into this example. We can have 1, then 1/6, and then 5 and 1. And we could do a very similar thing with the dominant 2. So instead of simply 1, 5, and 1, we could have 1, 5, then we could prolong that dominant harmony by inserting 5/6 chord and only then resolve it back to the tonic. This is it for the lesson on 1/6 and 5/6. Don't forget to move on to the next parts of the lesson in which you will be able to harmonize a bass line using all the chords you have learned so far, which is chord 1, chord 5, chord 1/6, and chord 5/6.